took care of a lot of the media chunk, and it looks like there's going to be a lot more picking with Cobb's work. He personally asked him to do the interior of the mothership for the re-release, where they actually went inside the ship. This opportunity also paved a way for Lawrence working with model maker Greg James to translate his beautiful painting into miniature. He spent what time he had available since he was busy. Basically, you'd walk into the room, the top of the room would lift up and continue like an elevator. A number of small flying saucers would fly up towards the top of the room. And then these 7 arms would come down and close the top of the room, creating a new. He was also eager to explain in some ways what those things meant. It didn't matter if it was one drawing or a handful, everything was done with a specific intention. Interesting related to the mothership, going to Suskin, that the 7 arms lock into. We built that at a facility at Marina del Rey. The next show that came in after we wrapped was Blade Runner. I had a couple friends who were working. The roof of the police station is actually the top of the flying saucer. Jodorowsky's Dune that never got made, and it looked like he got hired for designs, including that version of an ornithopter. So some unused designs, it looks like. So it looked like, didn't actually, I don't know, this looks like a pretty large body of work for only being tangentially. Cobb's relationship blossomed while Cobb was entrenched in the very early days of Alien. At one point, Spielberg was considered a possible director. It was just a brief thing. He could never work out his schedule to do it, but he was interested. However, Cobb divulged his thirst for live-action filmmaking. I would suggest Engel's ideas, said Cobb, verbalized the actor directing. Let's do this and that, and we could shoot for a shoulder close up for the shadows. Even his works changed on what that film could be, and eventually it was settled that a film would be a sequel to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The plot hinged around an idea Spielberg had about the Kelly Hopkinsville UFO incident. For any real development began around this time, Cobb had just arrived in Spain to be work on Conan. He and Spielberg, along with writer John Sayles, met once in Paris to discuss the potential direction of Night Skies. Cobb introduced setting the film child in the family, Spielberg's first request was to add another kid. Cobb went off with sales and did another draft and presented it. Upon reading this new draft, Spielberg suggested moving the film from remote Texas to suburbia project, and Spielberg hired Melissa Matheson to rework the story with a new title, E.T. Realized that Steven had changed the script a lot, said Cobb to the LA Times in '88. Went back to tell a story he had decided to direct the project, but Kathleen Kennedy, Spielberg's longtime producing partner, called Cobb with a proposition. Well, Ron's contract said he would receive a $7,500 kill fee, as well as 1 point of the back end of the film's net profit. With only a deal memo, Robin Love sent an invoice to Universal, $800 million worldwide. As I've told the LA Times in '88, there's a semblance of ironic justice in how things worked out. Ron spent all those years doing cartoons and not getting paid, and he gets $1 million for not really doing anything. Douglas Adams, the author of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, originally conceived and executed the idea of sentiment. He couldn't resist the money and couldn't resist his agent. There was a BBC TV series originally, which was very Doctor Who, I thought. It was a great show, even the simple production value. ABC wanted to subject matter. For instance, they questioned why Vaughan spoke in poetry. They wanted to instead change them to sing Frank Sinatra songs. They're trying to minimize the budget at every turn. Ultimately, they didn't understand the humor of the show. Ron's work was beautiful, and his ships were innovative and inspiring. Their excitement waned each time the executives would come in and give us a change of course. The Last Starfighter, after technology-based design. While on Alien, Cobb met a man named John Whitney Jr., one of the two founders of a special effects and animation company called Digital Productions. The animations in a process they called digital scene simulation. Unfortunately, Alien moved to England and the production enlisted digital companies overseas. In a Cinema Fantique article from '85, Cobb stated, John always wondered if I wanted to be involved as an art director for the company. I said I would be thrilled. Cobb continued explaining his thirst for knowledge informed his decision process, the way in which the computer could grasp an object. By the methods John Whitney was using involved fairly conventional mechanical drafting, with an emphasis on contour and mapping of the three-dimensional objects that would soon evolve into ships for a new movie called The Last Starfighter. In these pieces, there were no hard surfaces or hidden lines. It was as the object were made of glass, completely the shape design elements would be geometrically primitive. You don't necessarily have to nest geometric primitives alongside one another using this. I built this ship out of a series of cones and cylinders all intersecting so that mathematically it would be relatively easy to put together. Months and months to yield meaningful results. The design was a product of utilizing a computer instead of a traditional approach. More specifically, the ship wasn't beholden to the construction miniature and been made to work. While the impossible seemed possible with the aid of a supercomputer, it also came with its limitations. It took forever for everyone to become aware of the technical directing and the encoders so that many bugs could be isolated designed for the Gunstar. But due to the immense time it took to prepare, would be used. While the Gunstar is a ship built around a lot of cones and cylinders meshed together with strange shapes, the notion of photorealism became more obtainable as additional details were added after the initial approach. Digital techniques were developed for modeling dents and stains onto the exterior of the ship, allowing for a more tactile and believable object versus a pristine showroom 3D model. Hired to build the Star Car, which she did by extending a Volkswagen van by 14 inches, then customizing the interior. The car is made completely out of sheet metal. Except for the process, Cobb would come to Winfield's studio to make sure what Winfield was doing matched Cobb's own designs for this Cray XMP supercomputer. They didn't match, there wouldn't be unified design language between the practical shots and digital, which is fine. It was just a matter of getting the final piece of art. In the end, they had to make a few minor changes at the last minute in the computer. Foils were integrated to enhance the believability of the vehicle that drives on both land and air. Cobb's designs for the Kodan Armada highlighted their villainy and subtle choices. For instance, the way the wings sweep said the ships were strange and blocky, outfitted with Gatling lasers, obvious turrets, covered in strange markings. The designs for the mothership follow the same series of principles. Interestingly, all the ships were designed by Nick Castle, also a longtime friend of Cobb, recalls how certain concessions were made. The deck fighters were designed with these swiveling double engines that could pivot to a vertical position, and then the third engine in the back would also pivot. Originally, that action was all cut. Aside from numerous ships, Cobb also designed the Russellian base, which is built into the side of a mountain. This was home to several of the alien characters. As Nick Castle informs, that wasn't his initial instinct. There's no concept in the script as to what kind of alien this was. I had some early thoughts, one of which is to make Greg like a dog, some kind of dog loop. I never would have thought of it if I'd gone with my initial thought. We would have. Something that looked like John Candy's characters, bar from Spaceballs. That was one of the most wonderful things about Ron. He was more than a talented artist from a narrative and functional place. Throughout the last stages of The Last Starfighter, Castle and Cobb's relationship was the backbone of the decision in terms of the direction. Most of the time, I really just relied on his expertise, as I certainly had no expertise in science fiction. This was my second movie, and I'd never done any science fiction, even in film school, except for dark ideas were always better than what he'd come up with if he'd tried to finesse them later. Always caution himself and others about overthinking things. Once that inspiration hits, you need the background and to be immersed in order for it to be effective. After an exhaustive pre- and post-production process, the finished product was something that Cobb always took pride in, stating we were going to accomplish as much as we could, tax the system to the very breaking point. We knew at the end, when the crunch came, we'd have to retreat to whatever level it took to actually fill the hole. I feel that at least a third of the effects in the film attain photorealism. They're almost flawless. I'm very impressed and pleased for the time. It was certainly the most advanced stuff that had ever been done. We're facing against faceless aliens, giant robot armies, or an enhanced evil version of the hero. But in the 80s, they were more concerned about saving America from itself, a post-Cold War mindset. A group of high school hotties single-handedly stopped a Russian invasion. In 1985, a new film dipped its toe into this familiar formula, but in an entirely different way. The evil villain wouldn't be thwarted. The movie's climax features a group of college geniuses getting revenge against their unhinged professor, who has used them to create a dangerous laser-based weapon. They instead used the weapon to fuel his ball. However, the inception of his involvement actually started before there even was a movie. It began with his relationship to the director, a former roommate and close friend, Martha Coolidge. I had no idea what the third act was going to for us to figure it out, Coolidge recalls. Was Cobb? He cracked it. Ron said, "You don't want to be violent, even though it's revenge, so how about the getting back at the professor with some popcorn, then blow up his house with it." The laser, which was designed to be able to hit human target from space, was instead used to hit a bag of Jiffy Pop was conceptualized by Ron Cobb with the experts. USC and Caltech professor was Martin Gunderson, at the time was leading laser scientist in Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program. His involvement ensured that whatever the design was would be backed in the exact form it was designed, but theoretically could exist. Before Ron came on to do this, I was frustrated with early artists or designers who didn't care about the technology they was real. How are they going to convince the audience it is? Reflecting on her working relationship with Cobb, Coolidge, like many others, was privy to his talent but also his irreverent sense of humor. Well, it's a little bit early, but it looks like another lengthier section the next time with his work on Back to the Future. Um, it might either be this or we might hopefully finish the Morkborg